Greetings, fellow narrative nerds. Have you ever wondered what it takes to craft exceptional stories for video games? I'm LudicLore, and you've come to the right place because that's what this channel is all about. I've been playing video games since the 1980s and have been studying mythology and literature for almost as long. I'm also a professional game designer and writer with several published game credits, so I have been fascinated with video games, storytelling, and fusing the two my whole life. While the point of this channel is to offer you insights into how to tell incredible stories through video games, this is my first video, so I wanted to give you some personal background and go over my design philosophy. How do I make design decisions? What approach do I take to solving problems? And what are my priorities? I want to discuss this because you can't make games without a design philosophy, and if you don't know what yours is, you're most likely going to make a confusing mess instead of a great game. Without further ado, let's dive into my design philosophy, which revolves around three main pillars: coherence, engagement, and player agency. These principles guide every decision I make, ensuring that the stories I create are not only entertaining but also immersive, meaningful, and memorable. So, when we're talking about coherence, I like to consider four major areas: world building, themes and meaning, narrative innovation, and closure and resolution. In world building, we want to examine the core idea and develop a reality in which that core idea isn't just our core idea, but the whole world's core idea. Our game's universe needs to be constructed so that anyone who engages with it intuitively understands what kinds of challenges and behaviors are appropriate for it. Without the post-apocalyptic setting of Fallout, players could very easily be confused by the hordes of super mutants and raiders fighting, and the Diamond City guards would probably look pretty goofy walking around Boston, surrounded by average everyday citizens. My point here is that world building should inform the direction of all of your game's features. Everything from plot and characters to level design and mechanics should reflect the world in which they exist. Next up, we have themes and meaning. We already touched on themes with our Pokemon Fallout mashup and how the themes of those games, as reflected in their world building, don't quite line up without some extra narrative work. But there are other ways that themes and meaning can go awry. See, themes and meaning are a great way to give a story personal resonance with the audience. Pokemon and Fallout are both great examples that have companionship as a theme despite their different methods. But some themes just won't land because they are being put there more for the developers than the audience. In my opinion, this is the cardinal sin of writing or creating anything. Crafting a story just to push your agenda to an audience because you want them to think like you reeks of inauthenticity, and the audience will smell it a mile away. That brings us to our next fundamental to coherence: narrative innovation. Is the novelty we are incorporating more for ourselves or our audience? Narrative innovation is a great way to drive the industry into new frontiers, but it can be a tricky prospect without a holistic approach. For it to be a successful endeavor, it must be effectively blended into the mechanics, the level design, the art, combat, and every other conceivable aspect of the game. Games like Portal and Gears of War have pushed boundaries with innovative storytelling techniques. Whether it's Portal's seamless integration of storytelling within gameplay or Gears of War's use of the Lancer's chainsaw bayonet to heighten narrative tension, throttle action, and create anxiety. Innovation enhances the player's journey. The final thing I try to think about when developing a coherent narrative is closure and resolution. This concept is where all of the narrative threads are tied together, and all questions are resolved. This is part of fulfilling an audience's desires, but more than that, it's about making the story come full circle. We'll get more into this when we dive into story structures, but it is a critical storytelling aspect, regardless of the medium. Regarding providing closure and resolution, I consider the Mass Effect trilogy, where player choices shape the narrative over several years. They invested over half a decade into creating this story, their story. However, the series faced criticism for its initial endings, with all roads leading to Commander Shepard's death, leaving many unsatisfied due to a lack of closure and leaving several narrative threads untethered to anything. Fans felt betrayed, and BioWare was blasted for it to the point where updates were pushed to offer a new ending. This underscores the importance of fulfilling narrative arcs that honor player agency. Now that we've covered coherence, the foundation of great storytelling, let's move on to another crucial aspect: engagement. Building an engaging narrative ensures players remain invested in your story from beginning to end. This relies on pacing, emotional resonance, and understanding of psychological principles, all of which contribute to creating immersive narratives. Pacing is about ensuring the story unfolds at a captivating rhythm, avoiding monotony or overwhelming the audience, which is critical for all types of communication and art. And video games are no different. If your game is a 30-hour slugfest, your audience will burn out on the perpetual action. If your game has all the drama of a dry lecture on postmodern architecture, your players will pray for the sweet release of the afterlife. Give your players a blend of tempos, but more importantly, give your players options. It's important to remember that you are not the sole contributor to your game's pace, and you can give your players the reins to control how quickly or how slowly the narrative moves forward. You can offer them options to avoid combat and overcome obstacles in novel ways. An example of this being done very well is Baldur's Gate 3, where players gain comparable experience for finding role-playing solutions to combat encounters, and nearly all encounters have multiple approaches and outcomes for resolution. While the pacing is a great way to engage players in the unfolding of the story, we still need to get them emotionally invested to begin with. And this boils down to emotional engagement with the world and its characters. Players resonate with characters possessing depth and vulnerability. These are traits that demand authenticity and evoke empathy on a visceral level. This means careful thought, not superficial gesturing or dogmatic belief, needs to be given to character portrayal and plot events. In television and film, we recognize any character covered in plot armor and unearned power as a writing failure. All characters in your game or any other story should feel like real, tangible people. They should have flaws, values, beliefs, traits, mannerisms, merits, and skills that make them complex. This goes double for villains. Even though they are evil and they may have earned their power through nefarious means, they still need to have earned them in your story. All characters should be dynamic and earn their achievements, and the world the story takes place in should be the same, flawed yet precious, dynamic yet timeless, and above all, realistic. Interesting characters and settings that evolve and become better or worse are the core of getting your audience emotionally invested. By understanding psychological principles, we can serve our audience's more profound needs. It is probably no secret that games have long sought to captivate gamers in this manner, and tremendous progress has been made in this regard. However, there is a distinct difference between manipulating your player's psychology and empowering it, and both can be used to captivate an audience. These principles can help our audiences learn, grow, and adapt to the changing world. This is something I am particularly passionate about. I wrote my master's thesis about the use of games as psychological skill-building tools, so expect a few videos on this specifically. This is what truly separates games from any other storytelling medium and brings us to our final key aspect of narrative design: player agency. In games, player agency is paramount. From character customization to choices and consequences, players want their decisions to matter. Imprinting on a character avatar deepens the player's relationship to the game and story through that character. Character customization allows players to embody their avatars fully, fostering personal connection and investment in the narrative from the start. Being able to continue customizing the look, feel, playstyle, and behavior of a character makes players feel more connected. We'll look deeper at how character customization can be influenced by the narrative and the different ways it can influence stories in future videos. The final way to respect player agency is to honor their choices. Allow their choices to have a real impact on the way their story evolves, influencing their character development. Overall, we should prioritize the player's journey, not impose the designer's vision. Understanding the role of a facilitator of player stories enhances narrative depth and authenticity. Sadly, this concept is becoming less common in the game industry. Despite research showing that players derive their primary sources of challenge, fantasy, and gratification from the choices in single-player narratives, game designers and journalists frequently publish articles and essays about players experiencing choice overload or promoting railroading as a positive approach to growing the industry. More importantly, we've seen the industry greatly expand the market of massively multiplayer online games to the point that the very games that gamers want the most get sidelined. While cognitive overload and choice paralysis are well-documented phenomena that affect some gamers, the mere existence of these issues does not universally invalidate offering players meaningful choices. Instead, it highlights the importance of designers being familiar enough with their audience to scale choices appropriately. Consider one of the most successful game franchises in history, Dungeons & Dragons, which has traditionally centered on the philosophy that the dungeon master is not the star, and their vision for how things unfold is not the main attraction. In fact, many players stop participating after a few sessions due to DM inflexibility, toxicity, or railroading. This is supported by a growing number of D&D posts on Reddit, where complaints about DM inflexibility are the second most common reason for leaving a group, following logistical issues like session planning and life-work-play balance. Before I close this out, I just want to wrap up by saying that crafting cohesive narratives in games demands a delicate balance of creativity, discipline, and respect for player agency. It also requires game creatives to diligently connect with and understand their audience. With social media at an all-time high, there's no reason or excuse for game industry professionals to be disconnected from their players' wants and needs. Can gamers be unnecessarily mean? Anyone who was on Xbox Live in the early 2000s can confirm. But if you want a career in an industry that is based on selling a product or service to gamers, i.e. the games industry, you need to know your consumers, not villainize them. Otherwise, you're going to have a very bad time, and you're going to make everyone else have a bad time too. Anyway, that's my design philosophy in a nutshell. I'd like to thank my editor Malasuerte and a special YouTuber who gave me critical encouragement. You know who you are. I appreciate the support and advice you both offered me, and I look forward to making this channel something you both can be proud of. I'm planning a series on literary story structures, as well as for video game narrative models and industry terminology. Thank you all for joining me today. If you're eager to learn more about narrative design, then don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have topics you'd like us to explore, games you'd like us to analyze, or have feedback, drop me a comment below, especially if you disagree. Until next time, keep crafting stories that transcend pixels.